2019 versus 2026. The default tip buttons used to read 15, 18, and 20%. Today they read 20, 25, and 30%. A 73% jump in what the screen asks for the same cup of coffee. Nothing about the service changed in those 5 years. The wage rules did not change. What changed was the default on the screen, and the default is doing most of the work. The math is simple. When the menu price rises, a flat percentage tip rises automatically with it. Raising the suggested percentage on top is a second hike, stacked on the first. 66% of Americans now hold a negative view of tipping in 2026, according to Bankrate. That is up from 59% a year earlier. The screen turned into a confrontation point. 8% of Americans say they are openly annoyed by pre-entered tip screens. 27% now tip less or not at all because the prompt feels pushy. The pressure is backfiring. The category nobody asked for is self-service tipping. A machine took the order. A machine made the food. A machine still asks for 25%, and a quarter of Americans say that is where the line breaks. Tipping was built for full-service dining. Reward attentive service. That logic has been quietly attached to transactions where there is no real service at all. Square's payment data tells the rest. The average tip on food and beverage transactions fell to 14.9% in Q2 2025, below 15% for the first time since digital tipping was tracked. 16.5% in 2021, 16.1% in 2022 and 2023, 15.9% in 2024, 14.9% in Q2 2025. The line bends down for the first time on record, while the buttons on the screen keep climbing. Full-service restaurants tell the same story slower. The average tip there fell from 19.6% in 2022 to 19.3% by late 2024. Small in percentage terms, billions across a full year. Quick service is sharper. Tips there dropped from 16.5% in 2021 to 14.9% in 2025, a steady 4-year decline. The customer is not catching up to the screen. The customer is walking away from it. 41% of consumers tipped servers 20% or more in April 2026, per USA Today. That is down from 45% in September 2025, a 4-point drop in 7 months. The slide is accelerating. 4 in 10 Americans say they are tipping less overall than 2 years ago. The most common reason? Prices on the bill are already higher. Inflation hit the tip line twice, and the workers feel it first. Average tip earnings per shift fell across cafes, bars, and counter service in 2025. The screen raised the ask. The receipt lowered the payout. If you want to see the real numbers behind the headlines, subscribe to the Data Desk and hit the bell so you never miss a breakdown. So here is where part 1 leaves it. The prompt climbed 73%. The actual tip dropped below 15%. Somebody is paying for that gap. And part 2 has the data on who. $2.13 an hour. That is the federal tipped minimum wage in 2026, and it has not moved since 1991. 20 states still use it as their legal floor for tipped workers. That gap is the entire structural reason the tip screen matters. In 20 states, the difference between $2.13 and the real minimum wage is supposed to be filled by tips, by the customer, not the employer. 5 times. That is how many more categories now show a tip prompt at checkout compared to 2019. Restaurants, coffee, counter service, self-checkout, retail. The prompt followed the payment hardware everywhere it went. 72% of Americans told Pew Research that tipping is now expected in more places than it was 5 years ago. The same hardware, the same software, pushed into categories with no tipping history. 29% of Americans now see tipping as a flat obligation, not a choice. Another 21% still see it as a choice. The other 49% say it depends entirely on where, when, and who is asking. And then a new line appeared on the receipt itself. 12% of full-service restaurants now add a mandatory service charge to every check, according to CNBC. The rest reserve it for large parties. The service charge is not a tip. Under the law, that money belongs to the restaurant, not the server. The customer pays it thinking it covers the tip. Often, it does not. At full-service tables, the system still works. 79% of customers tip when there is a real server, real plates, real attention, per toast. The instinct lines up with the original logic. 79% versus 17%. At a real table, 4 out of 5 customers tip. At a counter, fewer than 1 in 5 do. The screen is the same. The customer's read on what earned a tip is completely different. Counter service tipping was an experiment. The data is now in. When the customer does the work of carrying, refilling, and clearing, the tip rate collapses. The screen cannot fake the service. Menu prices in restaurants are up roughly 20 to 25% since 2020, per BLS. So the same 20% tip on the same dish now pulls more dollars out of the customer's pocket before the screen even asks. Operators feel the pressure on both sides. Labor costs are up. Customer tip rates are down. Some respond with service charges. Others raise menu prices outright. Neither solution is invisible to the customer. Delivery is the third front. Average delivery tip rates fell from over 14% in 2022 to under 11% by mid-2025. The same prompt, the same default, the same downward line on the chart. For the worker, the math is unforgiving. A 5-point drop in the average tip on a busy shift means real lost income. Sometimes the difference between a paid bill and a stretched paycheck. And the cash tip is fading too. As card payments take over, the tip jar gets smaller. Digital tracking made every tip visible, to the IRS, to the employer, to the data dashboards. Where do you draw the line? Drop a number in the comments, the highest percentage you still tip without hesitation. Every room is different. Part 3 has the data on which categories are pulling back fastest, and one place where the tip is actually rising. Here is the part that surprises most viewers. At full-service restaurants in Q1 2025, average tips actually rose slightly, before settling at 19.1% in Q2. The table service tip is the most resilient line on the chart. Fine dining held steady even as fast casual collapsed. That gap between the table and the counter is now the clearest dividing line in the entire American tipping economy. 2021, 16.5%. 2022, 16.1%. 2023, 15.5%. 2024, 15.2%. 2025, 14.9%. 4 straight years of decline across the broader food and beverage average. The reset is not a moment, it is a trend. And then Washington moved. The No Tax on Tips Act passed as part of the 2025 federal budget package. From 2025 through 2028, tipped workers can deduct up to $25,000 in qualified tips on their federal return. The IRS finalized the list of qualifying occupations, more than 70 of them, from bartenders to barbers to water taxi operators. The law does not change the customer experience, it changes the worker's paycheck. That is the quietly pro-worker piece of the story. The same dollar of tip income now goes further for the people earning it, without forcing the customer to pay more at the screen. The generation gap is sharp. 83% of Gen X always tip at sit-down restaurants. Only 43% of Gen Z say the same. Different generations are quietly rewriting the rules of the receipt. Yet 78% of Americans still say they tipped the same or more in 2025 than the year before, per Adyen. The decline is not universal. It is concentrated in the categories where the prompt felt least earned. The customer is also getting smarter. The custom tip button, once a hidden option, is being used far more often in 2025. People are choosing their number instead of accepting the default. States are moving too. California already bans the tipped wage credit entirely. New York City is debating a full phase-out. The $2.13 floor from 1991 is finally under real political pressure. Operators are adapting. Some restaurants are dropping the suggested tip back to 15, 18, 20%. The original defaults, and reporting better customer satisfaction without hurting worker earnings. Others are testing service charges paired with full transparency. The customer sees one number on the bill, the worker sees a guaranteed wage. The screen disappears from the experience entirely. Plus 73% on the prompt, 14.9% actual average, 79% at the table, 17% at the counter, $2.13 federal floor. 5 numbers describing one of the most contested transactions in American daily life. The deeper signal is good news. The American customer is not refusing to tip. The American customer is refusing to be pressured. The instinct to reward real service is alive in the data. The screen forgot one thing. A tip is a thank you, not a tax. When the prompt treated it like a tax, the customer treated it like one, and started looking for the lowest legal number. 73% on the screen, 14.9% in real life. The gap between those two numbers is the entire story. What is the last category where you still tip without thinking? Drop it in the comments. And we will see you in the next data file.